Hello. The city was already humming when Darren stepped off the subway. It was just after 9 a.m., and the streets of Manhattan pulsed with that familiar weekday energy, people in motion, heels clicking, horns honking, steam rising from vents. The air smelled like concrete and ambition. Darren adjusted the cuff of his charcoal gray suit and glanced up at the skyscraper ahead of him. 64 stories of glass and steel. Ellison Grant Capital. The name glinted in silver letters above the revolving doors. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Inside, the building's lobby was all marble and modernism. High ceilings, a giant abstract sculpture, and silence. Thick, professional silence. The kind that made you question the volume of your footsteps. Darren's shoes tapped lightly on the polished floor as he approached the reception desk. Behind it sat a woman in a pale cream blouse, her hair pinned back in a tight bun. She looked up as he approached, her expression neutral until her eyes took him in. He was young, black, tall, clean-cut, but not flashy. He held no briefcase, no visible ID badge, just a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. That was when her posture shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. Her smile faded before it even fully formed. "Good morning," Darren said, offering a polite nod. "I'm here for an interview. Darren King. 10 o'clock with Mr. Ellison." There was a pause. A beat too long. Her eyes flicked toward the elevator banks, then back to him. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice tight. "We don't usually take walk-ins at this hour." Darren blinked. "It's scheduled. With human resources. Mr. Ellison is expecting me." The woman pursed her lips and tapped on her keyboard. Her tone shifted. "Clip now. Just a moment." She leaned to one side, pressing a button on her headset and whispering, shielding her mouth with one hand. Darren couldn't hear the words, but he caught the glance she gave him mid-call, discreet but assessing, as if she were trying to decide whether to believe him. After a few seconds, she stood up. "I'm going to have security escort you to the side lobby. There's been a delay." Darren raised an eyebrow. "A delay? I was told to arrive at 9:45. "Yes, well," she said, voice slightly cooler now, "you'll be more comfortable waiting elsewhere. The main lobby's just for registered guests and staff." Before Darren could reply, 2 uniformed security guards were already walking toward him from the far end of the lobby. One was tall, bald, with a face like a granite wall. The other looked younger, but his hand hovered near the radio clipped to his belt. "Sir," the tall one said, "we're gonna need you to step aside for a moment." Darren turned slowly. "Why? I've done nothing wrong. I'm here for a scheduled appointment." The guard didn't flinch. "We just need you to wait over there, in the side lounge. Standard procedure." Darren looked back at the receptionist, but she was already pretending to answer an email, her eyes firmly locked on her screen. He felt the heat rising in his chest, but he kept his voice even. "I don't understand. I have a confirmation email. I can show you." "That won't be necessary," the younger guard cut in. "Please, sir." It wasn't a request. It was a dismissal. Darren clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around his portfolio. For a moment, he thought about pushing back, about saying exactly what this felt like. But something in the room warned him not to. Not yet. He followed them silently, escorted past glass doors and into a smaller, dimmer waiting area with gray chairs and no windows. The lights buzzed faintly overhead. The older guard stood near the exit. The younger one glanced at Darren, then said, "Someone will come get you when they're ready." Then they both left, and Darren sat alone. So that's how it is, he thought. Still happening. Still like this. The receptionist never even asked for his name. She didn't look at his resume. She didn't verify anything. She just saw him and decided he didn't belong. He exhaled slowly, scanning the room. No water. No magazines. No clock. Just 4 chairs and a camera in the corner. He checked his watch. 9:52. He was early, but just barely. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. He stood, walked to the door, peeked out, only to find the same guards stationed at the hallway, watching. He stepped back inside. Another 5 minutes. Then footsteps. But not from the hallway. From the other side. The glass door swung open, and a tall, silver-haired man in a navy suit stepped in. "Darren," he said, smiling warmly. "There you are." Darren blinked. "Mr. Ellison?" The man nodded and extended his hand. "You look just like your father. I've been looking forward to this." The guards froze. The receptionist turned in her chair, suddenly pale. "Let's not keep anyone waiting," Mr. Ellison said, resting a hand on Darren's shoulder. "We've got the boardroom ready, and lunch waiting upstairs." The moment Mr. Ellison placed his hand on Darren's shoulder, the atmosphere shifted like a curtain being drawn open. The guards, once rigid with authority, now stood awkwardly, uncertain whether to salute or disappear. The receptionist rose halfway from her chair, lips parting to say something, perhaps an apology, perhaps an excuse, but nothing came out. Just the dull hum of the air vents and the soft echo of Mr. Ellison's words. "You look just like your father." Darren's expression didn't change. Not at first, but something behind his eyes flickered, subtle recognition, a shift in posture. He said nothing, letting the weight of that statement hang in the room like a suspended gavel. Mr. Ellison led him back through the main lobby. This time, no one blocked his path. No one asked him to wait. The guard stepped back. The receptionist lowered her gaze. The sleek elevator at the end of the hall opened before they even pressed the button. 47, Ellison said as they stepped inside. The panel lit up in gold. As the doors closed, Ellison turned to Darren. "I hope you weren't waiting long. I came down to meet you myself, but they must have shuffled you off before I got to the lobby." Darren offered a polite smile. "Just a few minutes. Nothing I couldn't handle." Ellison chuckled, mistaking composure for comfort. "Still, I'll have a word with the desk. That's not the welcome I had in mind. Especially not for Dr. King's son." Darren nodded once, still silent. The elevator ascended smoothly, a soft chime marking each floor. 47 stories of New York melted beneath them. "You know," Ellison continued, adjusting the cuff of his monogrammed shirt, "your father saved my son's life. Open heart surgery. Complicated case. 3 specialists turned it down. Said there was too much scar tissue." He paused. "But your father?" He just looked at the scans and said, "Tell your boy he's going to wake up and be able to run again." And he did. 2 months later, he ran his first mile. Darren finally spoke. "He remembers your son. Said he was the one who asked if he could eat pizza again before even asking if the surgery worked." Ellison laughed. "That's him. Still obsessed with food." The elevator pinged. Floor 47 was quiet. The hallway carpet was plush, deep blue, muffling their footsteps as they walked. Abstract art lined the walls. Office doors framed in glass stretched down a private corridor. And at the far end, sunlight. They entered a wide, glass-walled conference room with a sweeping view of the Hudson. Inside, a long mahogany table gleamed under soft lights. A catering cart rested nearby with coffee, fruit, and sandwiches arranged like art. 3 people sat at the far end: a senior partner, a woman from HR, and a man in his 30s wearing a navy blazer with a firm handshake face. They stood as Ellison and Darren entered. "Everyone," Ellison said, motioning with pride, "this is Darren King. You've all seen his resume, but what you may not know is his legacy." Darren raised an eyebrow. Ellison caught it and grinned. "Not the kind of legacy that means family money or trust funds. The kind that means character. Integrity. I know what kind of man his father is. And based on Darren's transcript, I'd say the apple didn't fall far from the tree." The others nodded respectfully. The HR rep gestured to a seat. "We're so glad to have you here, Darren. We've reviewed your application, and your academic record is exceptional." "Thank you," Darren replied, finally allowing his voice to fill the room. They began the interview. Standard questions at first. Why this firm? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Tell us about a time you overcame adversity. Darren answered each with quiet confidence. His voice steady, thoughtful. His words precise, but not performative. He didn't need to prove anything, only to speak the truth. The more he spoke, the more the team leaned in, engaged not just by his qualifications, but by something harder to name: presence. Then, about 20 minutes in, Ellison stood. "I'm afraid I have another meeting in 5, he said, turning to Darren. "But I wanted to say this before I go. Your father gave my son a second chance. You've already got my respect. But if you choose to work here, know this: no one gets to question whether you belong. Not on my floor." Darren met his gaze. "Appreciate that." "Good." Ellison stepped back, then added, almost casually, "By the way, your resume said investment analyst, but I noticed your thesis from Wharton was on predictive algorithmic modeling. That's more technical than most entry-level roles here." Darren smiled, just slightly. "I like to build systems that work better than the people running them." Ellison laughed, clapped him on the shoulder, and left the room. As the door closed behind him, the room shifted again, this time with recognition. The others resumed the interview, but now their tone had changed. It was no longer just evaluation. It was anticipation. But downstairs, the fallout had begun. The conference room doors closed behind Mr. Ellison, but his presence lingered like heat after a flame. The HR rep straightened her notes, but her demeanor had softened. The man in the blazer, the junior partner, leaned forward, elbows on the polished table now. "Darren," he said, tapping a pen against his folder, "can I ask something off script?" "Sure," Darren replied. That line, about building systems that work better than the people running them, that wasn't just for flair, was it? Darren's eyes met his. "Not at all. I meant every word." There was a pause. The partner gave a low nod, almost impressed. "So what do you see when you look at our firm?" Darren took a breath, then delivered the truth, not dressed in disrespect, but wrapped in clarity. "I see a company with a lot of power and not much diversity past the reception desk. I see a board that claims innovation but hasn't promoted someone under 40 in 5 years. And I see clients shifting toward firms that look more like the world, not just the same 12 executives copied and pasted across departments." The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was thoughtful. The HR rep blinked once, then smiled. "Well, that's honest." Darren shrugged lightly. "I figured that's what you were asking for." Meanwhile, 20 floors below, the atmosphere in the lobby had shifted, just enough to be noticeable. The receptionist, Alyssa, hadn't spoken in several minutes. She stared at her monitor, her screen untouched, her fingers resting stiffly on the keyboard. Her supervisor, a middle-aged man in a pinstripe suit named Gerald, stood a few feet away watching the security footage from earlier. "So let me get this straight," he said slowly. "He came in, said he had an interview, gave you his name, and you sent security?" Alyssa fumbled with her words. "I didn't know. He didn't look like. He wasn't dressed like most of the—" Gerald raised an eyebrow. "He was in a suit." "Yes, but—" Her voice trailed off. The guards stood awkwardly nearby. The younger one looked especially nervous now, replaying the moment they'd escorted Darren into the side lounge. No aggression, no questions. Just assumption, wrapped in protocol. Gerald turned to them next. "Either of you confirm his ID? Ask for documentation?" "No, sir," the younger one said. "We thought the desk had verified it." "You didn't ask?" "No, sir." The supervisor didn't shout. He didn't need to. The silence did enough damage on its own. Upstairs, the interview had turned collaborative. Darren was at the whiteboard now, diagramming a predictive risk model in blue marker, explaining how one small shift in algorithmic logic could reduce false positives and fraud detection, something Ellison Grant had struggled with for years. "I'm going to be honest," the senior partner said, watching the diagram grow. "This is beyond what we've seen at the associate level. It's closer to R&D." Darren capped the marker and stepped back. "I'm not looking for a title. I'm looking for a place where ideas win." That line hung in the air. Another marker. Another match struck. At that moment, a soft knock came at the glass wall. It was Gerald, the lobby supervisor. He opened the door slightly, stepping halfway in, his eyes landing on Darren. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, clearing his throat. "Mr. King, I wanted to personally apologize for your experience downstairs. It shouldn't have happened." The room turned toward him. The HR rep frowned, puzzled. Darren nodded once, but said nothing. Gerald hesitated. The team at reception made a misjudgment, and the security response was unacceptable. "We're addressing it internally." Darren looked him in the eye. Not coldly, just calmly. "Will they be apologizing as well?" he asked. Gerald opened his mouth, then closed it. Yes, they will." "Good," Darren said quietly. "I don't want anyone fired, but I want them to remember what they assumed and how wrong they were." Gerald gave a solemn nod and exited. The door clicked shut. The room sat still for a moment. Then the senior partner broke the silence. "I hope this firm remembers it, too." And in that moment, something changed, not just for Darren, but for the culture he had just stepped into. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't stormed out. But he had shifted the room. The meeting concluded with handshakes and real momentum. There was no awkward, scripted thank you or "we'll be in touch" shuffle. The senior partner walked Darren to the elevator himself, chatting like an equal, not a candidate. He asked Darren if he'd be open to designing a pilot project within their analytics division. The HR rep suggested a private office instead of shared space. Even the younger associate offered to connect him with one of their tech investors. When the elevator doors opened again on the ground floor, Darren stepped out alone. No one escorted him this time. No one monitored him. No security waiting. But the lobby had changed. At the desk, Alyssa stood up quickly, smoothing the front of her blouse. Her face was tight with unease. Behind her, the two guards from earlier now stood rigidly, like statues trying to blend in with the wall. Darren approached the front desk calmly, each step measured, quiet, deliberate. The soft click of his shoes echoed faintly off the marble floor. "Mr. King," Alyssa began, her voice pitched somewhere between nervousness and professionalism. I just wanted to apologize. Truly. I didn't think I belonged," Darren finished gently. Her lips parted slightly, as if she might deny it, but she didn't. "I didn't know who you were," she said instead. Darren's gaze didn't waver. "That's the point, isn't it?" Behind her, the older guard shifted uncomfortably. "I made an assumption," Alyssa continued, her voice lower now. "And it wasn't right." "I see that now." Darren paused. Then he did something no one expected. He smiled. Not wide, not smug. Just enough to let the tension soften. "I'm not here to embarrass you," he said, "or make a scene. But I needed you to know you didn't just misjudge a name. You misjudged a story." She nodded quickly. "I understand." "I hope so," Darren replied. Then he turned to the guards. The younger one looked like he wanted to speak, but Darren beat him to it. "You didn't ask questions. You followed an order, but you still had a choice. I hope next time you make a better one." Both men nodded. Darren let the silence settle. Let the weight of it fill the space that had once tried to shrink him. Then he pulled a small card from his portfolio. It wasn't a business card, it was a photo. Laminated, slightly faded at the edges. He laid it gently on the desk. A photo of a man in a lab coat, standing beside a hospital bed, hand resting on the shoulder of a smiling teenage boy. The man had the same eyes as Darren, the same hands. "My father," Darren said. "The man your CEO calls when someone's life is hanging by a thread." Alyssa stared down at the card. She said nothing. Darren let it sit there for a second longer, then picked it up and slipped it back into his folder. He turned to leave. As he reached the doors, Gerald, the lobby supervisor, met him on the way out. His posture was more open now, almost deferential. "Mr. King," he said, stepping aside, "thank you for your time today. We'd be honored to have you here." Darren paused just before the revolving door. He looked at Gerald. "I haven't made up my mind yet," he said quietly. "But if I do, I won't be walking through the back door." And with that, he stepped outside. The city met him like a familiar rhythm, honking taxis, the scent of roasted peanuts from a cart, the rustle of wind in steel canyons. Darren took a deep breath. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't even surprised. What mattered was the next step. He pulled out his phone and texted his father. "Interview went well. Heading home. We'll talk tonight." A few seconds later, a reply. "Proud of you. No matter what they saw. I know who you are." Darren stood at the corner, waiting for the light to change. The story wasn't just his anymore. It was everyone's who'd been told to wait quietly. Everyone who'd been ushered to a side room while others were ushered upstairs. But today, he didn't just climb the building. He changed the floor plan. It had been 3 days since Darren walked out of Ellis and Grant Capital. 3 days since the quiet apology in the lobby, the handshake-less confrontation, and the walk back into a city that seemed suddenly sharper, clearer, less tolerant of silence. He hadn't told many people what happened. Not in detail. Not yet. He needed time. To breathe. To think. To decide. That Wednesday, Darren sat on the balcony of his father's brownstone in Harlem. The sun was low, slicing through the skyline like a gold blade, painting the bricks in soft amber. His father sat across from him, 2 mugs of coffee between them, untouched. "Was it what you expected?" his father finally asked. "No," Darren replied. "Not at all." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "They saw the resume. They smiled at the numbers. But they didn't see me until Ellison walked in." Dr. King nodded slowly. "That's what it takes sometimes. Not credentials. Not performance. Just power recognizing power." Darren didn't respond. His eyes were focused on the city beyond the railings. The city that had raised him and tested him. That offered opportunity, but never without a toll. "I didn't go there to test them," he said. "But I'm glad I didn't walk out when they made me wait." "You could have," his father said, watching him closely. "I know," Darren replied. "But then they'd never have known what they missed." His phone buzzed on the table. "Ellison Grant, HR. Darren, thank you again for your time. We've discussed internally and would like to offer you a hybrid position. 40% risk modeling, 60% strategic development. Partner track potential. Also, Mr. Ellison asked to speak with you directly. Let us know when you're free. Darren read the message, then placed the phone face down. Are you going to take it? His father asked. Darren didn't answer right away. He had spent the last few days weighing the offer, not just the role, but what it meant. To walk into that office every day, to work alongside the very people who had nearly dismissed him without a glance, to shape systems from within, to decide whether it was better to fix the machine or build something entirely new. I think I might, he said softly, but only if they understand who they're hiring. You mean what they're hiring? His father asked. Darren shook his head. No. Who? The next morning, Darren arrived back at the Ellison Grant building. This time, he wore no tie, just a black turtleneck, slacks, and quiet confidence. He walked through the same glass doors. But this time, no one tried to stop him. Alyssa, the receptionist, stood when she saw him. She nodded once, respectful, measured. She didn't reach for the phone. Mr. King, she said. Good morning. Can I call the 47th floor? Darren smiled. They're expecting me. As the elevator rose, he glanced at his reflection in the chrome. Not to adjust his hair or his collar, but to remember, to remind himself how it started. When the doors opened, Mr. Ellison was already waiting in the hallway. No assistant. No clipboard. Just him. Darren, he said, extending his hand. I appreciate you coming back. I didn't come to say yes, Darren replied, shaking it. I came to ask a question. Ellison looked intrigued. Go on. Darren met his gaze squarely. If I take this job, I don't want to be the guy you will out when you need a new face for diversity reports. I'm not here to fix your optics. I'm here to change outcomes. Ellison nodded slowly. That's exactly why I want you here. Darren kept going. And I want something else. You're building a mentorship program. I want oversight. Real involvement. Not as your young black voice. As a co-lead. A beat of silence. Then Ellison smiled. Not politely. Not like before. Genuinely. You've got it. Darren nodded once. That was enough. They walked down the hall side by side. No longer interviewer and interviewee, but two men who understood something now. That power doesn't always enter loudly. Sometimes it enters wearing calm. That afternoon, while final paperwork was being prepared, Darren took the elevator back down to the lobby. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Alyssa saw him coming and stood again, unsure. Darren offered a small nod. I'm starting Monday, he said simply. It's going to be different. Her eyes softened. I hope so. He didn't stay long. Just long enough to look around the lobby one more time. The room where they thought the story would end. But the truth was, it hadn't even started yet. And just like that, Darren didn't just walk into a firm. He walked into their blind spot and rewired it. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with something even harder to ignore. Presence, patience, and power. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let them see you after they tried so hard not to. Have you ever been underestimated? Then turn the tables without saying a word? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. If this story hit you like it hit me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see what quiet power really looks like. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it just shows up in a suit and changes the rules. Goodbye.